All right, well, welcome to our Principal Coffee Take Two. We are recording this because the recording that we took on Friday, unfortunately, did not get saved or wasn't processed correctly. So we're going to give the annotated version today. Let's just start by our introductions. I'm Liz Silva, the Broadmeadow math coach that's been working here since we first started with the Broadmeadow math coach position. And that was around 8 years ago. So I've been in different versions of this role, job sharing on and off, and I've specialized in different grades. Right now, I'm really focused on grades K1 and 2 this year. And before my time as a job share partner in the math coach role, I also job shared in grades 3 and grades 2 as a classroom teacher. I was a full-time classroom teacher for a while, and I actually started back here in 2004 as an intern. So I've been in the Broadmeadow community for a while. And this year I am really thrilled to be joined with a new job share partner, Lisl Heiden, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Liz. Um, I'm thrilled to be joining Liz at Broadmeadow this year as sharing the math coach position. I bring with me 20 years of experience as a middle school math teacher. In recent years, I've loved teaching and learning with younger students as an elementary math interventionist and also as an elementary math teacher at a Singapore math school. I have a strong belief in the deeper learning that's facilitated by constructivist math programs like our new Illustrative Math. I also wanted to mention that I've got two teenage learners at home who keep me on my toes. So again, I'm thrilled to be joining the Broadmeadow community. Felt so welcomed and thank you all for that.
And Lisa just reminded me, I should also mention, I'm also a parent of four. So I've been in the trenches for the last few years with you all and really appreciate anyone who's taking the time to watch this and be involved. And we love having connections with families, hopefully more so in person moving forward. So I know this is over Zoom, but we look forward to more in-person meetings and interactions this year. So that takes us to our agenda. Again, we're giving sort of an abbreviated version this time around. We were joined on Friday with Kathleen Hubbard, who is the head of the math department across the district. And she is bringing wonderful expertise from her positions in the past that she's had, similar positions in Brookline most recently. And she's been with us for, I believe, 3 years now. It's a little hard to keep track over the pandemic time, but she's been wonderful to work with and really been an amazing leader for the math department. So our first activity that we're really going to just summarize right now was that we started out by doing some math, doing sort of a sample of what you might see in the classrooms as students are starting their math lesson each day. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the K-5 math timeline and how we've arrived with illustrative mathematics today. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a little bit of family support links, ideas that you could do for supporting your student at home. We did have a little bit of time for questions on Friday. We're going to go ahead and put up our slide again with some information, contact information for Kathleen and for us at the very end. All right, so we're going to jump into just again a quick summary of some of the math you might see in the beginning of a lesson.
So this warm-up comes from a third grade lesson, and all the IM or illustrative math lessons start with a warm-up that is really about inviting students into the lesson, giving them kind of multiple access points to the lesson, and also and it also always ties to the learning that they're going to do that day in the class. So in this warm-up, how many do you see and how do you see them? Students would be asked to look at the dots. The teacher would flash the screen quickly, and we actually played around with this at our coffee on Friday, and it was really fun because I think some of the parents were surprised by how quickly they had to think about how to group the dots, and then they were able to talk at their table groups and share. And then when they shared back as a group, it was fun to hear the different ways that people had seen the dots. So, for example, some individuals rather saw them in fives and figured out like two sets of five, and then saw four sets of that. And we talked about how in the classroom we would be writing on the screen and showing these groupings, and depending on the grade level, you would even be sharing some expressions or some equations to build on the math learning. There's a sequence of these. So Liz, you want to put up?
Sure. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's the questions that the students would think about. And then the second of this series asks students again to look, and this time they might already be looking for, like, thinking about fives or tens. Um, and so that was what happened at the coffee on Friday too, and it was fun to see the progression. The discussion kind of builds on itself, and again, it leads to the learning that the students will do that day. In this case, in third grade, building into a lesson on multiplication.
So again, this is sort of just a quick example. We had a little bit more time on Friday to dig into this, but we wanted to show really how the conversation invites all learners in at the level that they feel comfortable with, and then really allows for teachers to really expand that over the course of not just that individual lesson, but the entire unit. So this brings us to a sort of bigger picture of our K through 5 math timeline. For those of you who were here earlier in 2011 when we adopted Think Math, you might remember that shortly afterwards, in 2017, the state and actually the entire country adopted the current standards that we have now, which were then updated in 2019 in Massachusetts specifically. So we had a little bit of tweaking. For example, a few of the standards in fifth grade that happened around data moved up to sixth grade. Some of the standards on coins in first and second grade were reshuffled. So overall, we're looking at today also the fallout, of course, from 2020 and the COVID pandemic and the disrupted learning that happened there. And you can see the big picture is really leading us to where we are right now with launching and evaluating the current program for illustrative math. And we've really spent some time, we've been searching for many years, as Kathleen mentioned on Friday when she was here. That process actually started a few years before she even arrived. The math department has been working closely with the curriculum leads to figure out different programs that are available that would meet our Portrait of a NEDM graduate and other components that we're really looking for: project-based learning, an opportunity to have students meeting themselves at all levels, including extension, as well as students who might need additional support. And we were looking for a culturally responsive program as well. So really, we had a lot of different components, and we landed on two programs, and eventually last year started off with a pilot for illustrative math. And now this year we are bringing it across for all grades. So the next slide here is just a reminder of what we're trying to do, really big picture wide across the district in our math department, not just K through 5, but I would say all the way up, is we're really working on no more mile wide, inch deep approach. We're trying to really work on building a stronger, deeper understanding with more opportunities for student engagement, with discussion, for investigation, for being able to really make meaning of the math rather than just have it be something that is given to them in a series of steps. And this really goes along with the practice standards that were adopted in 2011 with the new curriculum standards. These are the same 8 standards that we start in kindergarten and work all the way up through the 12th grade, really. So these follow students all the way. Unlike the content standards, these are really consistent, and we do roll them out very thoughtfully starting in kindergarten. I was just in a kindergarten class today introducing these to them. So these are sort of our big ideas. We really want students to work on thinking like a mathematician is what we'll tell this younger students, but being able to really actively engage with mathematics in their life. This next slide just gives you a general overview of where we are, again, right now in our process of actually implementing this new program. We have moved through the preparation, which was for a few years, a process of going through many different types of curriculum available to us. investigating and selecting a few to look at more closely. Last year, beginning our launch of the pilot part of this. And then this year, we're really moving into between the launch and the implementation monitoring stage. So we're launching with professional development that's going to be happening across the district. We have our half days that are set aside. So the math coaches are helping run the programs for the teachers, grade by grade. We're going to be working very closely with them. And then connecting back into our grade level meetings here, as well as our faculty meetings here. We're really going to be working on tying all of the practice standards together with our teaching practices and our new materials that we're getting from IM. This is, again, just sort of another overview of what we're really using in IM that really stood out to us. This program specifically was chosen because of the level of accessibility it had for all of students that we're going to be working with, for its alignment with the Massachusetts curriculum standards, and really how it supports our mathematics program's vision, which is a mouthful, but I'm going to go ahead and read it because it's pretty important. The vision is to develop critical thinkers who work independently as well as collaboratively to understand math both conceptually and procedurally in order to experience, appreciate, and make sense of mathematics in the real world. So again, a bit of a mouthful, but it's really the bigger picture that we're really all working towards. And this really connects to the portrait of a Needham graduate, which I know in the district we've spent quite a lot of time talking about and presenting, but really it's the foundation of the work that we're doing. So when we share these slides out, this is linked to an active site that shows you more about that if you're interested in learning a bit more about the portrait. All right, so this next part is going to be talking a little bit about the difference between traditionally taught math, or how many of the people watching this most likely learned math, which was the I do something on the board and you can follow those steps, and then you'll do it on your own. So it's the I do, we do, you do approach to this newer model of learning, which is really research-based. It's sort of a circle you can see here where this is an ongoing process. The teacher has questions, the students are also questioning together. You can see that during that invitation to math that we just showed in the very beginning. Even that would be really inviting the students to the conversation. Then the teachers are helping synthesize that learning, and the students are going to be constantly working in groups, working in partners, working alone. And you'll see on some of the slides moving forward that we have some pictures of what that looks like in the classroom, but we're really also learning how to give students some choices in what works best for them as we lead that sort of synthesis over the course of the unit.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the lesson structure of the illustrative math lessons. So as we mentioned before, each one starts with an invitation to the mathematics. So that's that warm up. Often the warm ups have they either have multiple answers or multiple ways of thinking about them, so that several students can share and connect. That leads into the activities for the day, which provide a deeper study of concepts, math concepts and procedures. And there's a synthesis section of the lesson where the teacher helps the students consolidate and apply their knowledge, or their understanding. So there's a lot of asking questions, gathering different points of view and points that the students have learned in their groups, and then sharing that and bringing those ideas together. It looks slightly different in the younger grades and in the older grades, but some of that structure remains. So all the grades have a warm up, all the grades have the activities and the synthesis. In the upper grades, there are often 2 to 3 activities per day, or per math lesson, I should say, where the students get directions for something and then may go off and work in either partners or groups, or usually in partners or groups, and then they will come back and talk about, or there'll be a discussion about what they just learned, and then there'll be another activity where they're working often with hands-on materials like math manipulatives, or like I was in a class the other day where there was cards where they were learning more about volume and having discussions in their group and having to match different cards that would represent the volume um, of particular rectangular prisms that they were looking at. So we call those the card sorts, and those are a really common activity for the kids to chat with each other and build on their learning. And then in all grade levels, we've got a cool down, which is a chance for the teacher to check in on individual learning. So it's kind of like what's sometimes called a ticket out. And it can be done many different ways depending on the grade level and the particular group. But it's a way for, again, for teachers to collect a little bit of information about where students are so that they can adjust their instruction the next day. All the grade levels also have centers. They happen in different ways. So in the upper grades, they may actually, let me start with the younger grades. They're built into the lessons. In the upper grades, it may happen on a separate day where they work on centers and get to play math games um, and do like a rotation of different activities that day. And the kids usually love those days, I've seen. Liz, do you want to add anything more to that?
Actually, I was going to go right into the pictures. I think you did a really great job
Oh,
really summarizing the different parts to this.
okay, great.
And I think we can show it in action a little bit over the next few slides, but thank you for the summary. So you can see here, as Lisl mentioned, we have different card sorts happening. This is a great example of one. This is also a way to help really connect meaning to the different things that students are learning. So for example, in this card sort that's featured, students were reading different types of scenarios in word problems and then needing to connect that to, in this case, it was an equation which had missing addends. But in other similar word sorts, or I'm sorry, card sorts, you'll have other ways for students to connect that meaning. So we're really thinking about the situational context as well as that abstract equation. And then you can see we have here featured a tweet from Melissa Cami, who teaches third grade. Any of you who have a student in Melissa's class have the pleasure of being able to be part of her Twitter, but it is private, so most people don't usually get the chance to see this. So you can see in this featured tweet, we have examples of students being able to really make a choice about their best workspace and their best tools to use during that time. So some students were using Chromebooks. A lot of IM is also available to students through both Chromebooks as well as iPads. And we're really rolling that feature out slowly so far this year, but very excited about that opportunity. And then again, we have the paper pencil math, the traditional being able to write it out, which we also really believe is important. Students being able to work together on the rug and students who are choosing to use the place near the big screen projector. So again, just having some of the student agency being part of this, we feel is really important. Here we have some pictures of hands-on activities. Again, the card sorts, and here you can see students in kindergarten are building some shapes. We have students that are counting and collecting, and students who are using different materials to measure, so iterating along and trying to see if they can count and record. And oftentimes we ask them to go ahead and make a prediction and start to make some estimation around that. In the next slide, you're going to see some examples of students collaborating. Again, this is a really built-in part of this program. So not only do we have that happening during the invitation to learning when students would be turning and talking and sharing with each other and sharing to the whole group, we have opportunities for students to work together during the actual independent work as well. And in this case, sometimes it's happening during centers, sometimes it's happening during one of the other independent work activities. But again, you have a lot of conversation coming back and forth, which we do roll out with students using different math talk strategies is what we're calling them, to make sure that they're happening in meaningful ways and just making sure that the listening is happening as well, and that students are able to come back and talk about the conversation. This takes practice, of course, and we really start in kindergarten and work our way up. And here we have some different examples of math language routines. This one is called Collect and Display, where we're really inviting students to help sort of share their ideas. And you can see the teacher here is also helping synthesize that. So collecting ideas, for example, some of the students were mentioning that they were noticing some of the blocks were hard, some of them were soft. So the teacher is able to give that the frame that's texture, and it's another attribute that we can use to sort these. Students who are sharing different shapes, the students share that information out, the teacher helps synthesize that, and also adds a layer of more precise vocabulary as we record this. So I think this is another good example of that balance between being teacher-led and student-led. Both of the voices are really important in these lessons. In this next slide, we have another example of the use of mathematical language. Here we have another chart being used by a teacher to help capture the students' thinking, but also make sure that we're using precise terminology. And you can see often in the classrooms when you walk in a growing word wall as we go throughout each unit. And on the other side, the second picture, you can see that this is another card sort. It's a little tricky to see here, but it's comparing fractions using discussion supports. So again, not just sending students off to have a conversation in general, we're really trying to get them to be focused on. So they'll have a goal with different language supports to help with them with that. Here we have some examples of meaningful discourse happening during different activities from the centers and from card sorts. We have another tweet from another Broadmeadow teacher in 5th grade, Miss Avery. She's another teacher who is great to follow on there. And she'll show a lot of different updates from across the different subject matter. But for math especially, I really enjoy seeing it in action. Here we have students who are playing the 5 Steps to 50, which alone was a pretty interesting game. But then the really, I think, most important part of that is the conversations that happen about the strategies with their partner. And that also is synthesized when the students come back together as a whole class, where they can kind of come out, and oftentimes the strategies will be charted by a teacher and then revisited the next day. And it helps because we have a combination of visual supports as well as linguistic available to students during that period, but also that we're going to be returning to throughout the unit. These next slides are another example of something that Lisl mentioned in those first summary slides about the structure. Here we have a tweet from Mackenzie Schneier, who's a 2nd grade teacher here at Broadmeadow, showing what we call a museum walk. And this actually happens in a lot of different subjects. We try to do this across the curriculum. It's something that I think maybe parents have been invited to do more often with literacy when we have writing celebrations or reading celebrations. But I have been a proponent of math celebrations for a while, and I think this is a nice example of celebrating the students' work and sharing it. So again, you can see in Mackenzie's tweet, we have different samples of the student work, and then the students themselves walking around, circulating, and observing what other people in the room have shared, and being able to come back and synthesize that together with the teacher and talk about their observations and what they've learned from each other's work. And here we have an example of some of the more creative ways that we try to involve and engage students. This was taken from last year's 5th grade, who were piloting the program. And this was work done during the fractions unit. We actually have more than one fractions unit, but this one was for multiplying fractions. And as you can see here, the 5th graders were designing flags and parks and working together to write story problems about that. They also were able to do some challenge problems for each other and connect it to more abstract equations. And again, I think giving students the opportunity to have a choice here and to get really creative with it was helpful for a lot of students, really engaging, and also gave them a chance to put all of the things that they were working on learning during the unit together. So again, when I revisit the Portrait of a Needham Graduate, these are a lot of the same topics that we're trying to reach through math here. And again, another tweet from a 1st grade teacher in our building. This is from Meredith's friend's classroom. We have some other pictures also from Shea Duga in 2nd grade, and other pictures from across our building and a few from around the district of students just engaged in the center time. So center time, we have lots of games, card sorts, different types of activities for students to choose from. Right now, I just came from a 1st grade classroom today where we're still in the rolling out stage of the centers, really working on revisiting each time. What does it mean to be in a mathematical community? We have a poster that teachers are adding to where they're talking about their expectations, and the students are really adding to that as they go each lesson. But over the course of the year, as students become more familiar with the centers, there's more and more choice involved. Another really great part about IM is that many of these centers are available to teachers in multi-levels. So there'll be early stages of understanding, and then the same game is available with more advanced levels of understanding throughout. And again, as the year moves on, we're able to provide more options for students or to encourage students to make maybe a different option or make a different choice based on the options and their own math goals and where they feel comfortable with. We talk a lot with the students about stretching your thinking and really giving yourself a challenge. So trying to get brave and make a mistake and try something challenging sometimes. And finally, again, as I mentioned before, there is an online platform for students and for teachers. Again, last year during the pilot, we were pretty careful about rolling this part out slowly because we were mindful of the fact that students were spending quite a bit of screen time at home during the height of the pandemic. And they were doing a lot of screen time just in general. So this year we are trying to find a balance between having some of this available to us, again, using Chromebooks or iPads, but also always having the paper and pencil option available, as well as the hands-on materials themselves. Because while the images are nice to look at on the screen, there really is a lot of research that suggests holding the materials themselves and manipulating them, especially at a younger age, is really important. So again, it's all about finding that balance. And we talk a lot about that with students too, finding the balance between the screen time and the hands-on learning, and just making sure that we're able to do what works best for ourselves as learners in the classroom as much as possible. So again, what will be available for families? We do have, in a moment in the next slide, a few more resources available, some links that we can share. But the big idea is that there are family letters and videos for each unit from IM itself that will be available. The family letters are going to be going home from the classroom teachers. There'll also be more available online. Right now, some of the features are, I believe, still password protected on the IM site, but that's something that's being updated and changed in real time. One of the things I've really been impressed with IM is that they are really adapting and changing based on the piloting schools information and feedback. So that was one area of feedback that we are adjusting. And we also have student books that will be going home. Most likely these will not be complete. This is more of a rough draft of thinking. These are the supports that students have, again, you saw in the pictures, available to them while they're working together with partners or working on a game, or again, working with something that might be online. So if your student's book comes home and has lots of empty pages, please know that that means they were most likely working online or with their partner. And again, those cool downs that Lisl mentioned that happen at the end of every lesson are really, I think, one of the most key components of tracking the students' learning. And those aren't included in the student books, but they're part of the process of the teacher figuring out where the class needs to go the next day and what really needs to be reviewed or previewed for the class. So again, the student book is sort of a snapshot of that, but it doesn't really show all of the different components. So just know that when they come home to you, the younger grades, especially kindergarten, most likely won't be using them as much. They're really focused on the hands-on part and the conversations that students are going to be having, but we'll be working towards that as the year progresses. So we have, again, as I mentioned before, a few resources. Some of these may look familiar to people who attended the principal coffee last year. We shared some of these then as well. So we will be sending out this slideshow where you can click on these links. We have IM fluency resources, some IM illustrative math information for families that none of that is password protected at least. So those will be available to you. We also have from the Mind Research Institute a list of family math board games. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mind, it's a really helpful organization in Massachusetts, in particular in terms of providing schools with not just math, but other STEAM related areas, support for curriculum, different ideas for grants. In fact, Mind partnered with ST Math and brought ST Math into Massachusetts and was how it became available to us. But they also have many other programs. They've partnered with the New England Aquarium, I think, recently too. So they have lots of things on their website. But their board games list is, I think, particularly interesting. Their ST Math parent resources that we have linked also might be helpful. A few people have mentioned that their students don't necessarily need the animation, for example, for every puzzle. And if that's the case, those parent resources do show that there's a way to fast forward that. Many of the students after the first few weeks of school also know how to fast forward those if they don't need them. We have some other resources there as well. Bedtime Math is a separate website that we've recommended in the past for parents who are looking for another way to engage their students with math at home. It's a free website. You don't have to sign up. I do believe there's also a free app available, but it really just sends out a story problem idea or context and then gives you different prompts to ask for different age levels. And the biggest kids prompt is generally pretty challenging. Even for upper elementary school students. But again, for bedtime math, the big idea is really just getting families comfortable around talking about math every day. So it could be for a dinner time conversation, doesn't necessarily have to be for bedtime, but the idea was to give people an opportunity to complement bedtime reading with some math. Open is a really great online resource. Again, it's free, where you can look for all sorts of challenging problems. They're very open-ended. That's why it's called Open Middle. They have different types of prompts that students have been familiar with before they've used them in different times in school. But we generally just use that as sort of an extra supplement rather than a main part of what we do here in school. So I would say most, if not all, of the problems that are available in that library would be pretty new for your student if you're looking for a challenge. And Open Middle has problems that are available from kindergarten math all the way up through 12th grade. So there certainly is something for everyone on there. If you're looking for a challenge and you feel like your student really wants something above and beyond, please feel free to explore that site. And finally, we have the Stanford University Dream Family Math site, which we have linked here. Stanford University has done a lot of the research behind some of the work that ST Math is using, and as well as Illustrative Math and some of the other math-oriented programs that we've been trying to incorporate in our math department's learning and professional development. So again, we did have a little bit of time on Friday for some questions, but it was, as always, it felt like we don't have quite enough time to do everything. So we do have available Kathleen Hubbard's contact information here, as well as if you're interested in following us on Twitter, we are available on Twitter. And please feel free to reach out to either of us through the Broadmeadow email or through calling us either. To have a longer conversation about any of this. So I think I don't know if I've missed any notes.
No,
you have anything to add? Yeah, I think that's everything.
Just a thank you to anyone who's joining us
yes.
And watching this. And yeah, please reach out with any questions.
You've made it to the end. Congratulations. And if you sat through both Friday and this recording, I guess that's extra bonus points. So thank you for your patience with this technology glitch. Hopefully our abbreviated version still hit the main points that we were trying to convey during our original presentation. And again, these slides will be shared, and please reach out with questions. Thanks for your time.